Hi guys, hello, welcome to my channel. June is coming to a close, and with that, so is spring, which is a little sad because I do love spring, but that does mean that summer is right around the corner. And over the last couple of weeks, I've been putting together a very long, extensive list of all of the books that are coming out this summer that I am very excited for. This list is going to be including the months of July, August, and September. And we're going to obviously start with the month of July. And within July, there are 4 different release days that we're going to kind of focus on. And the first one is going to be July 2nd, which, by the way, I have made a separate Amazon list of all of the books I'm going to talk about in this video. So I'll leave that link down below. I like to make lists of all of the seasonal releases that I do so that not only I can go back and look at them and kind of remind myself of what books I want to get, but also as a reference list for you guys as well to use. So I will have that linked down below. Anyway, let's go ahead and go over our first book, which again is going to be released on July 2nd. And this book is called The Love of My Afterlife by Christy Greenwood. And first of all, the cover of this is super adorable, but also that title, The Love of My Afterlife. So excited. I read The Dead Romantics a couple of years ago by Ashley Poston, and that one kind of had an afterlife-y type of vibe to it as well. And I really enjoyed that book, so I'm excited about this one. Let's see what it says. Oh, okay. A recently deceased woman meets the one in the afterlife waiting room, scoring a second chance at life and love if she can find him on Earth before 10 days are up. That sounds so good. If she wasn't dead already, Delphine would be dying of embarrassment. Not only did she just die by choking on a microwavable burger, but now she's standing in her shine like a star nightie in front of the hottest man she's ever seen, and he's smiling at her. As they start to chat, everything else becomes background noise. That is, until someone comes running out of a door, yelling something about a huge mistake, and sends the dreamy stranger back down to Earth. And here Delphi was thinking her luck might be different in the afterlife. And like I mentioned earlier, the rest of the synopsis basically just says that she's offered a chance to go back down to Earth and find this mystery man. This sounds so adorable, and I'm excited for it. The next book that we have, again releasing on July 2nd, is The Night Ends with Fire by KX Song. And I'm gonna be honest, I added this book solely because, first of all, the cover has kind of a phoenix type of creature on it, and I have always been attracted to the idea of a phoenix. I love just the symbolism of them kind of being reborn, coming from the ashes kind of a thing. I just love that concept. So I immediately was drawn to this cover, but also it has some really cool sprayed edges as well. But aside from the cover, let's go ahead and find out what this is about. So this one says it's inspired by the legend of Mulan, which I loved that movie, so already excited. We have a young female whose father refuses to answer to the imperial draft, but not only that, he's also planning to sell her off to get married, and her potential husband is says violent and ill-tempered. So she takes matters into her own hands, disguises herself as a boy to enlist in her father's place, and there's a lot more to the synopsis, but I'm gonna leave it at that because I feel like that's enough. And then the last one that we have for July 2nd is Obsidian by Jennifer L. Armentrout, which I have another book by her. I have not read it yet, but I'm excited to. And I'm excited to add this one to my little library as well because I love a sprayed edge, but I especially love a sprayed edge that kind of is a continuation of the cover art. I love it so much. So this one says, starting over sucks. When we moved to West Virginia right before my senior year, I'd pretty much resigned myself to thick accents, dodgy internet access, and a whole lot of boring ... Until I spotted my hot neighbor. With his looming height and eerie green eyes, things were looking up. And then he opened his mouth. Damien is infuriating, arrogant, stab-worthy. We do not get along at all. But when a stranger attacks me and Damien literally freezes time with a wave of his hand, well, something unexpected happens. The hot alien living next door marks me. You heard me. Alien. Turns out Damien and his sister have a galaxy of enemies wanting to steal their abilities, and Damien's touch has lit me up like the Vegas Strip. The only way I'm getting out of this alive is by sticking close to Damien until my alien mojo fades. If I don't kill him first, that is. Okay, so this sounds like a whole lot of fun. And actually at the bottom of the synopsis it says read the entire best-selling series, and then it has 5 separate books. So I don't think this is a new release of this book. I think this is just a special edition of it. And I'm actually really excited about that because this book does sound like a lot of fun, and if I end up liking it, I don't have to wait a bajillion years for the next book to come out. I can just get the second book right away. Moving on to our next release date for July, which is July 9th. And the first book that we have is actually going to be kind of a series of books that are being kind of I think re-released with different covers and things like that and sprayed edges. And that is Also actually by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So I think maybe she's just getting like a revamp of all of her books, which I'm totally here for. But this next book in particular is from the Covenant series. And the first book in that series is called Half-Blood. And that one was already released, I think last month. And I did just order it. So I'm very excited. Although I will say all the books in the rest of the series that are going to be released have sprayed edges. And I don't think I ordered the first book in time to get sprayed edges. So I might have to like color them in myself to kind of like make them match, because they all have their unique cover art obviously, but then the sprayed edges kind of like matches the color of the cover art. And all together they make this really pretty little like rainbow, and I obviously can't have one that just doesn't have any color on it. But anyway, the first book already came out, and the second book, which is the one that's coming out in July, is called Pure, which is obviously Covenant number 2. And then we have Deity, which is number 3, and that's going to be released on August 6th. And then book number 4, I don't know how to say this exactly, but Apollyon, something like that. And that's going to be released on September 3rd. And then we have Sentinel, which is number 5, and I think it's the last one in the series, and that one's going to be released on October 1st. And just so that we can kind of get like an idea of what this series is about, let's go ahead and circle back to that first book, Half-Blood, and let's see what this one is about and kind of like the setup of the series. Ooh, okay, there's like a little quote at the top that says, "You will kill the ones you love. It is in your blood, in your fate." 17-year-old Alex and her mother have spent years on the run from the Covenant, a school where the pure descendants of gods hone their powers, and half-mortal teens like Alex train to kill demons. Demons? I'm looking at that and thinking demons, but it's definitely not spelt like that, so I'm wondering if that's kind of like the same concept. But when her mom is murdered by demons and she has nobody else to turn to, Alex finds herself back at the Covenant, where she has two options: become a servant for the Pures or work twice as hard as everyone else to catch up in her training. And then the synopsis goes on a little bit more in detail about her like going to the school, but then there's also someone named Aiden that's mentioned, who is apparently gorgeous, and her biggest problem. So I'm excited. The next book that we have is The Darkness Within Us by Trisha Levenseller, and this is another kind of like book within a series. This is the second book. The first book is called The Shadow Between Us, and that's another one that was released last month. So I'm again going to assume that this is another series that's just kind of getting revamped with new covers and some beautiful sprayed edges. And I'm not going to go over what that series is about, just purely for the fact that I already did kind of talk about that first book in my last releases video. So we're just going to kind of like move right along. The next book that we have, and our last one I think that is going to be released on July 9th, is The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. And this one has like a super pretty, like enchanting kind of cover. It looks like a witch's cottage in the woods, which I love that vibe. It also does have some really pretty like lavender sprayed edges. So many books are coming out with sprayed edges. A lush cottagecore tale full of stolen spellbooks, unexpected friendships, sweet jams, and even sweeter love. This one is essentially about Kayla, something of that sort, who is a librarian at the Great Library of Elysium with her assistant Kaz, a magical sentient spider plant, which that is the most adorable thing I've ever heard. And apparently the library goes up in flames, so her and Kaz flee with as many spellbooks as they could carry to a remote island, which was apparently her childhood home. And when she gets there, she has to kind of like rebuild her life. And she meets a neighbor, a nosy and very handsome neighbor. And again, because she needs to kind of like rebuild, she needs money, and she decides to make jam for the town. So I do feel like this one has kind of like a cozy fantasy type of vibe, as well as obviously a romance involved. Now we have a couple of books that are going to be released on July 16th. And the first one is called The Bright Sword by Lev Grossman. And this one is essentially a King Arthur retelling. And it's going to be a trilogy. King Arthur, like the Disney movie, was never like my favorite. I think it was a Disney movie. Either way, it was never like my favorite movie as a kid, but as an adult, I feel like I could enjoy it a lot more. And I'm not going to read the synopsis for that one because it is very self-explanatory in the sense of it is a King Arthur retelling. And then the other one that we have is Girls Who Burn. This was actually in someone else's video, and I immediately added it to my list as well because, yeah, that cover. It looks so haunting and so intriguing. This one says, this is a twisty enemies to lovers thriller full of secrets, privilege, and murder. 18-year-old Addie Blackwood regrets nothing more than one horrible, mistake-filled night last summer. Hours after she hurled the worst words she could think of at her sister, Fiona was found dead at the bottom of a ravine. The police ruled her death an accident, but Addie's never bought it. Her ballet prodigy sister didn't slip and fall, she was pushed. And Addie's #1 suspect, Thatcher Montgomery, the rich kid down the street who always had a thing for Fiona. But when Thatcher is found dead in the same ravine, Addie must admit she was wrong, and now her only ally and alibi in catching the real killer is none other than her childhood rival, Seth Montgomery, Thatcher's cousin and the boy she's always loved to hate. So we do have a little bit of like a romance mixed with a murder mystery. Love that. Now we have our last release date for July, which is July 30th, and we've got 3 books. The first of which is called The Grandest Game, which I'm really excited for, and I think a lot of you will be excited for as well. This is a book by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and this is essentially a spin-off series for the Inheritance Games. And this one is essentially about the Grandest Games, which is an annual competition run by billionaire Avery Grahams and the 4 infamous Hawthorne brothers. And it says it's designed to give anyone a shot at fame and fortune. This year's game requires 1 of 7 golden tickets to enter, so it's kind of got like a Willy Wonka vibe as well. Some of the players are in it for the money, some for power, some for reasons all their own. Amidst it all is Grayson Hawthorne, tasked with a vital role in this year's game. But as tensions rise and the mind-bending challenges push the players to the limits, physically, mentally, and emotionally, it soon becomes clear that not everyone is playing by the rules. This sounds like so much fun, and I'm very, very excited. Again, I love the Inheritance Games, and I'm definitely down for more kind of like puzzles and things. Very, very excited. Second to last for July, we have The Wedding People by Allison Esposh. I'm so sorry, I feel like I totally butchered that last name. I truly don't even care what this book is about because this cover just like screams summer, but also just like the imagery has like a really fun kind of vibe. So very excited about it, but the synopsis for this actually does sound like a lot of fun as well. This one is basically about a girl who shows up to this inn, and she's literally the only one that is not involved in this wedding that is happening there. So essentially she is mistaken for one of the wedding people. It says, Phoebe is here because she's dreamed of coming for years. She hoped to shuck oysters and take sunset sails with her husband, only now she's here without him, at rock bottom and determined to have one last decadent splurge on herself. Meanwhile, the bride has accounted for every detail and every possible disaster the weekend might yield except for, well, Phoebe and Phoebe's plan, which makes it that much more surprising when the 2 women can't stop confiding in each other. I love the vibe of that. It just sounds like it's gonna be like a really cute, fun story about someone kind of like ticking something off of your bucket list, but also like the building of a friendship. And then last but not least for July, we have Gold, which is the 5th book in the Plated Prisoner series. This is not a new release. This book was released, I think, at the end of last year, but this is like the release of the paperback. I have the rest of this series in paperback, so I've been waiting very impatiently for this last book to come out in paperback so I can finally read this series. This is one of the longest sets of books that I've had on my shelves, and I am very excited to finally get to them. Now let's go ahead and move into August, and we have 3 different release days for August. The first one being August 6th, and we've got quite a few books to go through. I think this is like the biggest drop out of the entire list. And the first book that we have is Dark Restraint, which is the 7th book in the Dark Olympus series. If you've been following my channel for a little bit of time this year, I've been kind of like picking my way through this series. I feel like I've talked about it a few separate times. This is essentially an erotica series, a smut series, that are kind of retellings of Greek mythology in kind of a modern mafia style world. And I'm very, very excited. I think there's supposed to be a total of 10 books in the series, and again, this is the 7th. Next up, we have another book in a series that I am so excited for. This is Apprentice to the Villain, which is the 2nd book after Assistant to the Villain, and this is one of those books that was just like a total shock to me. I put off reading this book for the longest time because the cover just did not appeal to me. But then I randomly found out that it was a romance book, and I immediately went and grabbed it from the library. Absolutely loved it. It has such like a fun, quirky, like over the top, goofy, on purpose type of vibe, and I just loved it. So I have been very, very excited for this 2nd book to come out. So there's that one. Next book is This Ravenous Fate by Haley Dennings. And this is actually a book that I added to this list this morning. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know that the synopsis is the most appealing to me, but it is about vampires. Vampires are my new like fantasy romance obsession. And this one says, the first book in a decadent fantasy duology set in Jazz Age Harlem, where at night the dance halls come to life and death waits in the dark. It's 1926, and Reapers, the once human vampires with a terrifying affliction, are on the rise in New York. But the Saint family's thriving Reaper hunting enterprise holds reign over the city. 18-year-old Elise Saint, home after 5 years in Paris, is the reluctant heir to the empire. And then it says, Layla Quinn is a young Reaper haunted by her past. Though Reapers have existed in America for 3 centuries, Layla became one just 5 years ago. The night she was turned, she lost her parents, the protection of the saints, and her humanity, and she'll never forget how Elise Saint betrayed her. Ooh, drama. But some Reapers are inexplicably turning part human again, leaving a wake of mysterious and brutal killings. When Layla is framed for one of these attacks, the Saint Patriarch offers her a deal she can't refuse: to work with Elise to investigate how these murders might be linked to shocking rumors of a Reaper cure. This sounds like something I would prefer to watch versus read, but we'll see how it goes. Next up, we have The Pairing. This one honestly got me because the cover was just really cute, and also the sprayed edges. It actually has like a little phrase on it. It says, "Some things taste better together," which just sounds really cute. This book is by Casey McQuiston, and it says, "This is her latest romantic comedy. Two bisexual exes accidentally book the same European food and wine tour and challenge each other to a hookup competition to prove they're over each other. Except they're definitely not." That's all I'm gonna read for that one because I feel like that's enough to kind of get a good vibe of the book, but that sounds really fun. Perfect for summer. Next up we have Silent Sister by Megan Davidazar, something of that sort. And this is another one that drew me in because of the cover. I don't know what about it exactly that I love so much, but I just do. And obviously from the cover you can tell it's kind of got that like thriller mystery vibe, which I do feel like murder mysteries are another thing that really reminds me of summer. Two sisters went missing on their class trip. Grace, the outgoing athlete who is friends with just about everyone, and Maddie, the wallflower wilting in her sister's shadow. But when Grace is found injured with no memory of what happened, everyone thinks she's lying. It's hard not to look guilty with Maddie's blood on her clothes. Next up we have a couple of books in a series that kind of like going back to earlier on in this list. I think that they are books that already exist that are just being re-released with new covers. And the first one that is going to be released on August 6th is The Coven by Harper L. Woods. Both of these books have really pretty kind of like haunting covers with gorgeous sprayed edges. This first one having kind of like roses on the edges. And this one has a quote that says, "A sexy, deliciously imaginative fantasy romance where the magicians meets ninth house with vampires." Again, I am all about the vampires right now, so very excited. And the very first thing the synopsis says is revenge. "Raised to be my father's weapon against the coven that took away his sister and his birthright, I would do anything to protect my younger brother from suffering the same fate. My duty forces me to the secret town of Crystal Hollow and the prestigious Hollows Grove University, where the best and brightest of my kind learn to practice their magic free from human judgment. The only animosity I face comes from the beautiful and infuriating headmaster, Alaric Grayson Thorne. A man who despises me just as much as I loathe him and everything he stands for. But that doesn't mean secrets don't threaten to tear the school in two. No one talks about the bloody massacre that forced it to close decades prior, only the opportunity it can afford to those fortunate enough to attend. Because for the first time in 50 years, the coven will open its wards to the 13 promising students destined to change the world, if the ghosts of Hollows Grove's victims don't kill them first." From the beginning of that synopsis, it definitely sounds like she's like younger. Obviously not like too young, but young enough for me to assume that she's going to be a student at this university. But then it's talking about the headmaster being beautiful. So it's either going to be like an age gap kind of situation, or maybe she's a teacher at this university. I don't really know, but I will be finding out soon enough. And then, like I mentioned, there is going to be a second book being released on September 3rd. This one's called The Cursed. And again, the sprayed edges on this one are so pretty. Like the cover is cool and intriguing, but the sprayed edges of these like purple flowers just are drawing me in, and I cannot wait. Obviously, I'm not going to read the synopsis for that one because we don't want to do spoilers. Next up, we have Dance of the Starlight Sea. This one is by Kiana Crystal. The whole vibe of this book is definitely not something that I'm typically drawn to, but I gotta say, the cover art for this book is so pretty. There's a quote that says, "Hades and Persephone meets Phantom of the Opera." I'm not super familiar with Phantom of the Opera, but I am very much obsessed with anything Hades and Persephone. This one also has a very interesting synopsis, so I just went over it really quickly. And basically this is about a girl who gets exiled to Luna Island, and apparently there's like a pageant, the Angel of the Sea pageant, and it says the pageant is a competition to seek a high priestess for their commune. To win it is to be loved and adored by all, the ultimate blessing. But apparently the pageant winner beforehand had only reigned for a year when they're supposed to reign for 7. And there's also like eerie things happening. And so our main character enters the pageant to kind of like figure out what's going on with the island. I'm intrigued. Next up, we have The House Where Death Lives by Alex Brown. And this one I feel like is definitely something that's probably going to be a little outside of my comfort zone, but I mean, the cover of this is really, really intriguing to me. I want to know more. This YA speculative fiction anthology explores how the permanence of a home can become a space of transition and change for both the inhabitants and the creatures who haunt them. Each story in this anthology will focus on a different room in the house and feature unique takes on monsters from a wide array of cultural traditions, whether it's a demonic trickster, a water-loving rusalka, or a horrifying baby-imitating Tyanek. There's bound to be something sinister lurking in the shadows. A little bit of a background on me. I moved around a lot as a kid and I always envied my cousin. She basically lived and grew up in the same house for her entire childhood, and I just always like envied that. Like I wished I could just stay in the same place with my same familiar things. I'm very much a creature of habit, and I am very much someone that gets attached to things. So it was really hard for me growing up, like moving all the time. And it's actually kind of funny because now as an adult, I move myself around a lot. Like I get kind of bored after a while if I've like stayed in the same place for too long. But I will say kind of like my like one really big major goal in life, one thing that I just feel like would to me mark kind of like making it in life, is to buy my own house. So with all of that in mind, like I just feel like this book just sounds so intriguing to me. Like houses and kind of like what they mean to me have always been kind of like a thing in my life, you know? So I'm very excited for that, even though it does sound very creepy. Now let's go ahead and move on to our next release date in August, which is the 13th. And our very first one is a fun little romance. This is The Breakup Pact by Emma Lord. I'm not gonna read the whole synopsis because there's a quote at the top of this one that I think is a good representation of what the story is. It says, two best friends who haven't spoken in 10 years pretend to date after breakups with their respective exes go viral. I feel like this one's just gonna be a really fun beach read. I'm excited for it. And then the next book that we have, we're kind of going back to our creepy vibe. This is Lady Macbeth. Is this not like the most beautiful, haunting cover ever? This is another one that I saw in someone else's video this morning and I instantly added it to my list because I have to own this cover. Like I have to have it. It is so pretty. And this one, obviously from the title, is basically a reimagining of Lady Macbeth. So it says, the lady knows the stories, how her eyes induce madness in men. The lady knows she will be wed to the Scottish brute who does not leave his warrior ways behind when he comes to the marriage bed. The lady knows his hostile, suspicious court will be a game of strategy, requiring all of her wiles and hidden witchcraft to survive. But the lady does not know her husband has occult secrets of his own. She does not know that prophecy girds him like an armor. She does not know that her magic is greater and more dangerous, and that it will threaten the order of the world. She does not know this yet, but she will. I am so intrigued. This is by Ava Reed, by the way. And then our final book for August 13th is Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright. And this is another one that was very intriguing to me because of the cover. And I do believe this one is also about vampires. Yes, a villainous, bloodthirsty heroine finds herself plunged into the dangerous world of power, politics, and murder in the court of the Vampire King in this dark romantic fantasy debut. That is literally all I need to know. Beautiful cover, Vampire King, sold. Now let's go ahead and move on to our last two books for August. This next one is going to be released on August 20th, and this is another kind of like sequel or second in a series. This one is My Dark Desire by L.J. Shen and Parker S. Huntington, and this is the second book in the Dark Prince Road series. The first book was My Dark Romeo, which is a book that's actually been on my wish list for so long. It's kind of expensive, both these books are. The first one is like $45, and then this one is $41 because they are special editions. These special editions are top tier. The only reason I haven't already purchased the first one, My Dark Romeo, is because I honestly have not heard the greatest of things. I haven't heard like a whole lot, but what I have heard has just not been like great. So I just keep kind of going back and forth on whether I want to spend $45 on a book that might be disappointing. Now we're going to move on to our very last book for August, which is going to be released on August 22nd. And this is another book that I have been highly anticipating for this year, and it's Wisteria by Adeline Grace. This is the third book in the Belladonna series, and I have been thoroughly enjoying this series. It's kind of got a little bit of like a paranormal romance kind of aspect, but then also each book has like a murder mystery you have to solve. They're so fun. I do think I liked the second book a little bit more than the first one, just because the second one we got more of the other characters that are involved as well, and we also got some really fun new ones. And I'm now remembering that the second book left off on a pretty big twist, so I'm very, very intrigued to see what happens in the third book. So very, very excited about this one. Now let's go ahead and move on to our very last month of this video, which is September, and we have 5 different release days. for September, and also a lot more books. This is literally, I think, my longest new release video that I've done. So many books coming out this summer. First one for September is Repeat After Me by Jessica Warman. This cover, it's very bold with its color, and I'm really intrigued by the octopus. I don't know what it is about, like, well, just animals in general when they're on covers. I'm always really extra intrigued, but also the sprayed edges of the tentacles just looks so fun. I'm very excited. In retrospect, I probably should have passed on the ceviche. I mean, ceviche is delicious, don't get me wrong, but a dish made from a supposedly immortal octopus should really come with a warning label. Caution, consuming a telepathic sea creature of unknown origin may result in immortality, no consequences to any actions, and getting stuck in a time loop for all eternity. This should be a cephalopod-induced nightmare, but somehow, in some ridiculous way, I feel like I'm experiencing the extraordinary, the gift of endless opportunities to get things right. But when I wake up every morning and it's Friday again, sometimes it feels more like a never-ending prison sentence. They say some things are worse than death. Guess I'm about to find out. So yeah, this one has kind of a Groundhog's Day kind of theming, which I love. And it all seems to revolve around some tainted ceviche. Very excited about that one. The next book that we have is Immortal Dark by Tigist Girma. I hope I'm saying that right. This one, again, is another one that the cover really drew me in. It's got such a weird, cool, dark, creepy kind of vibe. And then also it has some sprayed edges that actually have like a saying on them. It says, "No soul can enter without an invitation." There's a quote at the top that says, "The Cruel Prince" meets Ninth House, which I loved both of those books, so already this is a win. But then it also says, "In this dangerously romantic dark academia fantasy where a lost heiress must infiltrate an arcane society and live with the vampire she suspects killed her family and kidnapped her sister." We've got more vampires. I didn't realize how many vampire books I had on this list until now. And then the last book that we have for September 3rd is The Games Gods Play. And this does say book 1 of 1, so I'm going to assume that there's going to be more in the series. This one says, "The gods of myth are alive and well. Once every century, they select a new ruler in a cutthroat competition, pushing mortal players to the limit. But this year, Hades is done sitting on the sidelines, and he's picking a champion no one expects. In this modern mythic romantasy, she'll fight for her life, for the god of death." I've said this so many times, but I absolutely love books that have like a competition aspect, specifically ones that are like fantasy books, but also the fact that this has Hades in it. Yeah, I'm really excited about this one. Also, this book was written by Abigail Owen. I don't know if I said that. The next couple of books that we have are going to be released on September 10th, and the first one of those is one that I have been very excited for. I didn't know was coming, but now that I do, I'm very excited. And that is Somewhere Beyond the Sea by TJ Klune. And this is a sequel to The House on the Cerulean Sea, which I read, I think it was like 2 years ago at this point. It was one of the very first books that I read after like getting back into reading, and I absolutely loved it. It was such a cute little story. It's basically about a guy that works for, I think it's like the administration of magic, or it's something cheesy and simple. I don't remember. It was a while ago. But he essentially works in a position within like the magical government where he kind of like goes to adoption agencies that house magical children and kind of like make sure that they're being cared for and things like that. And he's tasked to go to the House on the Cerulean Sea, which is home to some of the most dangerous children, and kind of like report back on how dangerous they are, that kind of a thing. I thoroughly enjoyed kind of like the process of getting to know all the kids that are in the house. I think there was like 5 or 6 or so, one of which was like a gnome. The other one I think was like a blob or something like that. And then we had the devil, like Lucifer himself as a child, which was so fun. So I'm really excited and intrigued to kind of like see what's next for them. The next book that I have is actually gonna be released on September 14th. And this is a book that I found from Instagram. This one is Scalebound by Logan Piercy. And I don't know exactly what this one's about, but I do know that it's like a fantasy romance involving dragons. So that's literally all I need to know that I want to get it. But let's go a little bit deeper into the synopsis. So it says, Fourth Wing meets Powerless and Lightlark in this fairy tale story of dragons, plagues, and curses. Aurelia grew up knowing she was the result of the tattoo on her father's wrist. The engraved sign came from killing a dragon, which caused him to obtain one of the 5 curses. Aurelia was the curse. She was a scalebound, half dragon and half mortal, and had been hidden in a tower her entire life as she was wanted for her golden blood. With dragons possessing elemental abilities and being able to transfer these gifts to their riders, Aurelia has to claim her ability with her connected dragon and train before the kingdom is immersed with plague by the Deathlies, or she is killed for her gilded blood. I'm very intrigued by the fact that she is a curse and like half dragon, but then also that second half very much reminded me of Fourth Wing, which I absolutely loved. So I'm very intrigued by this book. Next up I have a release for September 17th, and it is A Dark and Drowning Tide. And this one I purely put on this list because of this cover. It is so ethereal and haunting and so freaking pretty. I saw this one on someone else's list and I had to add it. This is by Alison Saft. A sharp-tongued folklorist must pair up with her academic rival to solve their mentor's murder in this lush and enthralling sapphic fantasy romance. From the New York Times bestselling author of A Far Wilder Magic, which I literally just bought, I think last month. And that book, funny enough, is actually another one that I bought purely because the cover art was really pretty. So whoever's doing the artwork for this author is crushing it. Now, last but certainly not least, we have our last two books for this entire video. They're both going to be released on September 24th. And the first one is The 13th Child, which the cover of this is definitely what initially drew me to it. This book is by Aaron A. Craig, and I don't remember at all what this was about, so let's find out. It says, this is the story of Hazel, a young healer navigating a ruthless court to save the life of the king, grappling with a pantheon of gods with questionable agendas as she fights for agency and true love in her own life as the goddaughter of none other than Death himself. We know I love Death as a character, but having Death's goddaughter as a character, just as good, honestly. Hazel has always known she wasn't like the rest of her siblings. A 13th child, promised away to one of the gods, she spends her childhood waiting for her godfather, Merrick, the dreaded end, to arrive. When he does, he lays out exactly how he's planned Hazel's future. She will become a great healer, known throughout the kingdom for her precision and skill. To aid her endeavors, Merrick blesses Hazel with a gift, the ability to instantly deduce the exact cure needed to treat the sick. But all gifts come with a price. Hazel can see when death has claimed a patient, when all hope is gone and is tasked to end their suffering, permanently. Haunted by the ghosts of those she's killed, Hazel longs to run, but destiny brings her to the royal court where she meets Leo, a rakish prince with a disdain for everything and everyone. Ooh. There's a little bit more to that synopsis, but I'm gonna go ahead and stop there. I will say the cover definitely does not really match that synopsis to me, but fully intrigued. And then finally, our very last book for this video, we have A Fire in the Sky by Sophie Jordan. This one has a really cool cover as well. It has really pretty, like, bright blue looking sprayed edges, which I'm very excited for. Ooh, okay, there's a quote at the top that says, "Dragons are extinct, witches are outcast, magic is dying." This one kind of reminds me of a different book, but I can't think of which one, and it's kind of driving me crazy. It's like at the tip of my tongue. But this one is basically about Tamsin, who has been raised alongside the princesses, and it says she's treated as part of the royal family, but also as the lowliest servant. So I don't think that she's like biologically a princess. She's just been like raised with them for some reason. But then there's kind of like a crisis, and she is bartered off to be wed to kind of protect the other princesses. But then it says the wedding night begins with unexpected passion and ends in near violence when her trickery is exposed. I don't know what the trickery is. Maybe it's the fact that she's not a princess. I don't know. But it does say that he accepts Tamsin as his bride anyway. But then it says, but can he accept the dark secrets she harbors? Secrets buried so deep even she doesn't know they exist. For Tamsin is more than a royal whipping girl, more than the false wife of a man who now sees her as his enemy. And when those secrets emerge, they will ignite a flame bright enough to burn the entire kingdom to the bone. Magic is not dead, it is only sleeping. I'm super excited about this one. I think it sounds really cool. Again, that beginning part of like her being raised with, it reminds me of Folk of the Air series. Because isn't the main character, like the female, I don't remember her name, but isn't she like raised by a fairy family, like the fairy king, even though she's human or something like that? But it kind of reminds me of that. And honestly, anything reminiscent of that series, I'm down for because I loved that series. So anyway, with that, those are all the books that I have picked out and am highly anticipating for this coming summer, July, August, and September. Again, just a reminder, there is going to be a list of all of these books linked down below if you're interested in any of them. If there's any book that's coming out this summer that you're excited for that I didn't mention, leave it down in the comments below. I would love to look up some more books. Not that I need to add anything else to my list, but like, I'm always down for more books, you know?